Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where you meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. This is the 40th episode of the Shipping Podcast, and it's the first one with an American guest. Being such a conference pro that I am, having visited the Posidonia in Athens, Greece, and North Shipping in Oslo, Norway, I decided to go for the CMA, the Connecticut Maritime Association annual conference and trade show in the United States in March. So this is the first one out of 7 interviews that I made when I was at the CMA. On the 21st of March this year, I met with Carleen Lyden-Kluss. She's the CEO of Morgan Marketing and Communication. She's a maritime ambassador at IMO, and she's the co-founder and executive director at North American Environment Protection Association, NAMEPA. I hope you will enjoy the interview with Carleen Lyden-Kluss. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, Carleen.
Well, thank you so much, Lena. I am honored to be part of this project, which is so exciting. And I'm delighted that with a mission of wanting to engage people in the maritime industry, and you've gone to the advanced technology today of iTunes, you're doing such a wonderful job. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Could you please introduce yourself? I know you, but and probably most people know you, but for the listeners of the podcast, please.
Oh, certainly. Well, you know my name, Carleen Lyden-Kluss, but let me give you a little bit of my background. I grew up on an island south of Detroit, Michigan, where the Detroit River and Lake Erie meet. And for those people not from the Great Lakes area, they may think, oh, what are the lakes? Lakes are small. They're not. When I was a little girl, the Detroit River was the second busiest waterway after the Suez Canal. And going up and down because of the iron ore traffic and the coal, there was a lot of Lakers going up and down. And every once in a while, there would be an ocean-going freighter. And it was just so exciting. And I used to go down to the water when I was a teenager. And, you know, your hormones are roiling and your emotions are roiling. And I would go down to the water to soothe. And the water soothed me, but it also intrigued me because I watched the ships going up and down. And when I was a little girl, you couldn't go 5 minutes without seeing one of these great big ships. And I always wondered, where were they going? What were they carrying? You know, who was on board? And I never dreamed at that time that I would be part of such a wonderful industry. I left that little island in Michigan and I went out to the East Coast and went to school in Massachusetts and came down to New York afterwards. And I got into the advertising industry. So I was part of Ogilvy and Mather's account management group. That was the flagship office and one of the largest in the world. But I always had the love of shipping. And I came to it because I had met my then future, now past husband, whose father was president of Conoco Shipping, and his father got him to be a tanker broker. So my former husband was one of the founding members of what is now Mallory Jones Lynch Flynn, and I got to see the industry not just from the shore, but I got to see it from the inside as well on the commercial side. And at one point, one of his bosses said, I think we hired the wrong Kluss. Because I took my interest not only of shipping but of international relations, and I understood the correlation. And so I would ask questions, and they finally said, yeah, we hired the wrong Kluss. But at any rate, in 1992, I entered the industry on my own right. I started out doing cruise line marketing and taking the skills I gained from Ogilvy and Mather and applying them to an industry that I loved. In 1995, Jim Lawrence hired me at International Marketing Strategies. So I worked with him. I ran the Connecticut Maritime Association conference for 5 years. I worked with him on marine money, and we grew that product. And I then worked with him. We developed something called the Shipping News, which was the maritime industry's first television channel. Ultimately, Jim and I agreed that I would leave the Shipping News to go to the production company because that was the major source of expenses, and that was TV on the web. And then I left IMS, went to TV on the web, and then I started my own business. So I've had my own company, Morgan Marketing and Communications, since 1999, and started out as a sole practitioner, just, doing projects as a consultant, and now I have 14 employees.
Wow.
So it's really grown, and I started my business because by then I was a single mom. And I couldn't figure out how to be a single mom and put a roof over my children's and my head without doing what I had to do on my own. And I am so honored and grateful to the maritime industry because they supported me through that. I mean, there were people that wanted me to do what I do best, which is marketing and communications, in an industry that I love. And I'll be forever grateful for that.
I can understand that. I feel the same, but not on that large arena that you have.
Oh, well, I've been fortunate to develop that large arena because I get to meet so many fascinating people, and I'm so engaged with what goes on in shipping. I love everything about shipping, from stem to stern, from the bilge up to the bridge. And it just fascinates me. I mean, some people, and I too enjoy cruise ships, but I also enjoy being on tankers, product tankers, container ships. It's all fascinating because what I love about the shipping industry is that it is integral to the success of global trade. I will often say in speeches that we may be the second oldest business, but we're the first global industry. Nowhere else does the world understand the interlocking of countries, of trade, the way that shipping does. We've been doing it since time began, since the first person figured out how to float.
I saw that you have some large clients with your company, but you only take one in each segment? Or?
That's correct. I will take clients on a sector exclusive basis because, for instance, Blank Rome is a large client of mine, and it wouldn't be possible for me to represent Blank Rome and another law firm, or for me to represent one oil tanker company and another. And it gives me the opportunity to promote them and really engage with them on how to, meet their growth goals and their success goals. So I think it would be a conflict of interest, and I try to minimize that to the best of my ability.
So when you meet new clients, how do you help them? What is your take on that? What do they do wrong and what do they do right?
It's not always a question of doing wrong or doing right. Oftentimes it's a question of wanting to meet their goals and recognizing that they need some outside support in order to do that. I'll give you an example, and you're going to be hearing about it here at CMA. It was announced last week. I just finished renaming and rebranding a company within the shipping space. Fleetweather is now Accuritas. And I went through the whole process with him, and I do this with all of my clients. I do what everybody knows as a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? Where I get involved, and what is most interesting to me, is what are your core values? Because when you hear people speaking about what they believe their company values are, that's what you want to express to the greater world. Because you can have we claim we're in a commoditized business, but we're really not, because one company's values differ from another's. And it's identifying what I call the unique selling proposition between companies that distinguishes them in the minds of their clients. And so what I find incredibly fascinating is working with all of them and trying to speak with as many members of the company as possible, and then synthesizing that information to come out with what I believe are the values and the images they want to project into the market. So, for instance, one of the core values of Accuritas, or Fleetweather rather, was their accuracy. And I looked at various ways to express accuracy, and the root word in Latin is Accuritas. So we did the research on, domain names and trademarks, and it was available. But it really reflects how they take such great pride in their accuracy of the information and the data that they provide. So that was able to reflect that. I worked with, for instance, KC, and I wove together the threads of what was important to them: service, responsiveness, environment. Chembulk, I had such fun branding Chembulk, because it was clear to me that what they felt so strongly about is they were the 21st century chemical carriers. And that's sort of finding out what's the nugget that distinguishes one client from another company is what I find so exciting. And to watch a company grow and succeed. The Chembulk project was so much fun for me because, as everybody knows, it's become part of shipping lore at this point, is that the group that bought the ships from MTMM and created Chembulk bought it for, I think, $450 million, and 9 months later sold for $1.2 billion. Now, of course, I'd like to think that was the corporate communications that I'd worked on. So I called Bob Burke up and said, "Hey, Bob, do I get $1.25?" And he bought me lunch.
Yeah, but sometimes I think that communication and strategy within that area is looked upon as a soft value, which is not that important. I disagree with that view. But what do you say to those clients or the people you don't know that you want to have as a client and don't appreciate that it's really important?
Well, what I say to them is something that when I give talks about marketing and communications in the shipping arena is that for the last, I'd say almost 20 years, we as an industry can no longer afford to be invisible or silent. We have two elements that have contributed to that. One is the proliferation of publicly traded companies. Publicly traded companies have to look and act like multinationals that they are, because they now have a new consumer base that is part of the public domain, and those are investors. So you have to act and look as a multinational publicly traded company. So it's important for you to express your values. It's important for you also to distinguish yourself from another company. And that's where corporate communications comes in. Now, for the people that are also, you can look at the people that are privately traded or privately held companies. In the day of internet, you can't afford to be invisible or quiet, because if something happens, the world will find out. So you want to know that you're putting your best possible face forward and that you are being open and transparent about what you believe are your core values and what you believe you can contribute to your market's success. So it's not a soft value anymore. It's very much part and parcel of how you yourself can be successful.
And what about the industry as a whole? How could we be more visible?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, because as you know, Lena, I've recently been appointed an International Maritime Organization, IMO Maritime Ambassador. And that whole program is created to help communicate the value proposition of the maritime industry to the greater public. I mean, you and I know the value that shipping provides. You and I both know that seaborne transportation is I call it, the lubricant of global trade. We are the reason that products get from point A to point B. The greater public doesn't necessarily recognize that, partly out of sight, out of mind, partly because they just assume that the gasoline comes from the pump and that the clothes come from the store. But when you look at the whole logistics chain, it's all predicated and dependent upon seaborne transportation. Well, the IMO recognizes that the visibility of the industry and the image of the industry isn't what we would all like it to be. So they've appointed 35 maritime ambassadors around the globe, and our task is to help spread the word about seaborne transportation, about the shipping industry, and to help explain the pathways to careers in that industry. Because while there's been a downturn in many levels and many industries since 2008 and the financial crisis, shipping will always be there. There will always be jobs in shipping. And letting the public know that is so important. So we're tasked with reaching into the public in whatever ways we can. Through my work with NAMEPA, the North American Marine Environment Protection Association, I'm naturally in contact with students, whether they're elementary, middle, or high school students or into universities and academies. So I have a natural audience for that. How else can I get into the public domain is by reaching out through what we have in the United States, and they're actually global, our Rotary clubs and chambers of commerce and organizations like that. In fact, I'm being approached by them now to come and speak to them. And what I've got to do is find room in my diary to do so because I'm going to so many shipping events. So we're working on that calendar now. But it's important for us to let the business leaders know that, their goods don't just appear on the shelves. Their goods are brought by seaborne transportation. And we also have to make sure that we communicate not just the value proposition of getting products from point A to point B, but also that we're getting those products their most economically efficient method, but also the most environmentally benign method. You and I both know that seaborne transportation is the most environmentally benign mode of transportation, and that we can transport the most amount of goods with the smallest footprint. We need to make sure that people using shipping services understand that as well.
Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you. I am so honored because the pathway to that is that my United States Coast Guard asked me if I would consider being nominated by them. So my Coast Guard nominated me to IMO, and IMO appointed me. I, along with Rear Admiral Carey Thomas, were the first two ambassadors from the United States.
Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
We need it. We all need you.
Well, thank you. And it's really an honor to be nominated. It's an honor to be chosen. I applaud the IMO for taking this initiative because they really, it really is a question of spreading the word exponentially. And while shipping may be a small industry, we need to create a loud voice. And that's what organizations like the IMO are committed to doing. I'm hoping to be able to discuss in a few weeks' time what the plans are for 2018 and the World Maritime Day theme. And I think you'll find it's very exciting and will help propel us to a greater awareness and visibility within the public's mind. So I'm pleased about that. But if I had to identify a personal ethos, using a Greek word, my personal commitment and what gets me up in the morning every single day, anxious to get on with, what I have to do, is the opportunity to spread the word about the maritime industry. So this comes naturally to me. I mean, it's part of why I created, along with Clay Maitland, the North American Marine Environment Protection Association, NAMEPA. First off, I'm a contrarian. And anybody that knows me well will know that, is that if somebody says I can't do something, I'm anxious to go out and do it. And I was speaking with someone in Greece, and I was asking them about HELMEPA. And I said, why is there no MEPA in North America? And it was a gentleman who was a lifelong smoker, and he said, Carleen, it is because your country is so vast, nobody could wrap their arms around it. Well, if somebody tells me I can't do something, I generally like to prove them wrong. So I came back and I talked to ship owners, and I talked to classification societies, and I talked to the Coast Guard. And they all thought it was a great idea. So 8.5 years ago, I co-founded NAMEPA with Clay Maitland, and at our inaugural meeting, we had the Secretary General of the IMO, we had the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard, we had 3 flag officers, Transport Canada was there, and NAMEPA was born, and we started with 33 members, and now we have over 160. And we have, one of the things I did starting in 2006, again, to get the word out about the maritime industry, is I've held a World Maritime Day observance in the United States or Canada or Mexico since 2006. And now we partner with Transport Canada, with the Mexicans, to rotate that observance throughout the 3 countries, because it's so important to get the word out about the shipping industry and what maritime provides, and also offshore. And we've got to really communicate the values of the industry. There still is this perception that the industry is only interested in putting oil in the water and killing birds. That is so far from the truth. NAMEPA was founded, getting back to NAMEPA was founded when the industry wanted its voice to be heard and the recognition for what it is doing for the environment to protect it, at the same time that the public was demanding it. So when NAMEPA just came together because all the forces leading to it came together at the right moment.
And what do you do at NAMEPA?
Well, our activities are twofold. One is we bring together industry, regulators, environmental groups, and educators to talk about strategies to protect the marine environment. And on the other side, we educate seafarers, port communities, and students on how to save our seas. Our mantra is to save our seas. And that is the underpinning of everything we do. So on the industry side, we hold seminars and conferences to bring players together. It's extraordinary to me, Lena. And partly it's because of the size of North America that people engaged in an issue won't necessarily meet each other. We once held a seminar in Long Beach, California, and we had a panel on emissions. And at one side of the dais was the woman from CARB, which is the California Air Resource Board. On the other side was a vice president of the Pacific Maritime Shipping Association. Now, as you know, California has extremely rigorous emission standards. Well, in the middle of the panel discussion, suddenly the woman from CARB turned to the gentleman from PMSA and said, "Is that what you were talking about? We never understood what the issues were because they'd never met. All the work they'd done together had been either on conference calls or through email. And we brought these players together. And there was a realization of what the issues are." Again, in California, and I don't mean to pull them out, but these are good examples, someone from the port of Oakland never understood the regulatory process that shipping undergoes. He understood what happens once the ship got to the port, but he never fully understood what the industry was required to do out at sea. And that's something that I find extraordinary but frequent. I can tell you that in the last year, as NAMEPA, I've had 5 environmental groups come to me and say, "We want to go after shipping." And I said, "Really? Why is that?" "Well, we've realized that shipping isn't regulated."
What?
Absolutely. So I've asked them, "Well, have you ever heard of the International Maritime Organization?" "Well, no." "Have you ever heard of MARPOL's, Marine Pollution Regulations?" "No." "Have you ever heard of the United States Coast Guard, who enforce those regulations?" "Yes, but we thought they just, rescued people at sea." So there's a lack of public awareness of the regulatory framework under which shipping operates. So to a certain extent, you can understand where the public looks at us as cowboys at sea because they don't understand the extremely rigorous framework under which we operate. From MARPOL 1 to MARPOL 6, SOLAS, STCW, and now, of course, we've got the Maritime Labor Convention, the 4 pillars, the 4 legs of the stool that regulate shipping. And yes, there can be some bad actors, but that percentage is very small. We need our good activities to be known by the general public. And that's, I feel, is a core responsibility of everybody in this industry. NAMEPA just happens to be one of the vehicles for it, and the work that I'm doing as an IMO Maritime Ambassador, another vehicle for it.
I agree with you. And that is one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because I reach people who doesn't know anything about shipping. I reach my core fans. Those are the ones closest to me, I think, and that are people in shipping, because they get to know new things as well. Learn things they don't know anything about, but they won't ask. But we have a tendency to speak to each other.
Right. We do, and that's why we need to bring more and more people into the framework. We need more outlets like your podcast to reach the general public so they begin to understand it. One way, particularly since the financial crisis, of course, one way that we're able to get their attention is through jobs and job opportunities. As I said earlier, shipping will always be in place. Until we learn how to, we become truly part of the Jetsons, there will always be a role for shipping, and therefore there will always be jobs. And, there was a real wake-up call since 2008, and so many people lost jobs. So when we can reach students who understand the importance of jobs and explain to them the opportunities that exist within shipping, both at sea and at shore, whether it be in ports or in offices.
And also I think that the technical developments within the shipping industry right now, it's so big, so people will be interested in the jobs as technical jobs.
Right, absolutely.
Not as a shipping job, but as a technical job. And that will bring a new aspect to working within shipping as well, I think.
Yes, and some of the traditional barriers are coming down. One of the barriers that, as you and I, as members of WISTA are aware, Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, is that the barriers to women entering the industry are coming down. Historically, the pathway to a shipping career was through the maritime academies or hard labor. And now there are a number of women in the maritime academies, so the number of women in seagoing capacities are increasing. Because of technology, it's no longer a labor-intensive industry necessarily. There are many roles for women and certainly shoreside jobs. So you're seeing women on board ships, in offices, and at the pier.
Yeah. So you have been around for a while. What are the biggest changes that you have seen within the industry?
Well, I think, as you said, technology has driven a lot of the changes. And getting back to a point that I make over and over again is when I came into this industry, it was very much a close-to-the-vest industry and wanted to remain so. With the internet and modern communications, we can no longer afford to try to retain that because we're not. We have to become more visible, and we have to broadcast our core values, which is sustainability. And that sustainability of the environment, contributing to sustainability of people's lives through valuable jobs, and also the value proposition that we provide to the consumer. We're the reason they have food, energy, clothing, and technology, and cars.
Yeah. So how do you see the future for shipping in general?
Well, I think we're going to see greater automation, naturally. The world is going to greater automation, but that doesn't mean a reduction in the overarching number of jobs. I think you're going to find more opportunities through technology, and I think you're going to find a greater proliferation of the industry. We're talking about growth goals to 2050 that are extraordinary, almost double. So you're going to have people that are needed, qualified people, to enter those new jobs.
And I also think that new jobs also means other skills. We are opening up to people with other skills than we have had before.
Right.
And that also opens up for women.
Yes, of course. And one of the things that the industry has always been strong on is the fact that we are a global industry. In today's day and age, you can see on the internet what's going on the other side of the world. But wouldn't it be fun to go there? And the barriers to travel are just not there anymore, and the opportunities that are afforded globally are there. We can work anywhere now, and that's so exciting. I started traveling when I was 15, and that was considered a big deal. And the fact that I could live anywhere and work anywhere came to me when I was very young. That's coming to everyone now at a very young age. Just the vision that you can be anywhere and do anything is a huge difference between when I started out in my traveling career of 15 and today.
Of course.
At this point, you can't even say the sky's the limit because of what we're doing in, outer space. We just had Mark Kelly come down from almost a year of being in space. He got taller, which I found very interesting. He grew 2 inches. They're measuring him against his twin. And he grew 2 inches, and apparently he's going to stay tall. But, we've got such ambitious goals for our global society. And there is always going to be a role for shipping. And it's just a matter of where does your vision take you? If you keep your opportunities endless, you can do anything.
Did you ever have a role model?
Did I ever have a role model? My role models come in many different forms. And it's sort of like my son, because I was a single mom, my son adopted 5 men whom he modeled himself after. He took bits and pieces of 5 different individuals. And to a certain extent, I've done the same. The people that I admire so much are the people that don't take no for an answer, that somehow find a pathway to success. The ones that I admire are the ones that started out with nothing and became something, but who are so grateful for the journey, because the journey is what helped shape them. I didn't walk into the position that I have today. It wasn't easy, but I was given opportunities by people. A person that taught me so much is Morten Arntzen. Morten Arntzen, when I was doing work for OSG, I sent him, because, again, balancing being a single mom and working, I sent him a document at 1:15 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. And he must have been abroad because I got a response immediately. And he said, "What are you doing sending me work at 1:15 in the morning? I don't ever want to see a document from you at 1:15 in the morning. I need you well rested because I need your creativity." He was the first person that had ever told me that I was creative, because I'm terrible at art. I draw stick people. But I sat back and I thought, my gosh, what I do, the value that I provide clients is creative. I have to think of new ways to communicate messages. I have to think of what those messages are. So that is being creative. Morten Arntzen taught me that, and I'll be forever grateful to him.
But now that you are a role model, I would say you are a role model. Are you mentoring anyone? Do you get approached by younger women or men?
I mentor about 20 women and men right now. I'm always mentoring people because it's a way of giving back. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunities I was given. Between Morten hiring me for OSG, the work that Clay Maitland and I have done collaboratively on building nonprofit groups that are doing the work that a lot of for-profit entities embrace but don't have the time to do themselves. So I mentor a lot of people, and what I say mostly to women is, no matter what your life path, where it takes you, try to remain active in a career, because you never know what's going to happen with your life. When I came out of the workforce to have my children, I didn't dream that it would be required for me to go back into the workforce, because that's not how I was raised. I was raised to be a wife and mother. I was given a good education, but that was the expectation of me. And within 6 years of being out of the paid workforce, it was required for me to go back into the workforce. And I was very fortunate that I'd kept my skills up and I was able to re-enter the workforce. I tell women, always, always keep your foot in some sort of paid environment, because no matter if your husband is, the head of a hedge fund, you never know where your life is going to take you, and it's important to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. When I mentor men, it's mostly men that have been working within large multinational corporations who suddenly find themselves cut loose after the age of 50. And they've only worked within the womb of a large corporate culture. And the idea of being independent is frightening to them. I've been independent since 1999. And I've learned that you can build your own business, and you can get your own health care, and you can work out your own retirement plan. The only barrier to your success is that there's a perception of having a barrier. So those are my 2 messages when I'm talking to women. I say, please keep in the workforce. Do, in some fashion, keep your skills going. When I speak with men, and it applies to women as well, don't be afraid of being an independent consultant and sole proprietorship, because I went from being independent consultant to now having a larger business. I'm still a small business. I have about 14 people that work for me around the country. But it's not something to be afraid of because you can do it.
Who do you think the world will have to listen to on the Shipping Podcast? Who do you think I should interview the next?
The next person, well, I don't know the extent to whom you've interviewed, but I would think it would be really interesting for you to interview Patty Rogers, because Patty does reflect the values that we have been discussing today. Patty is somebody who sees opportunity everywhere and isn't constrained in any way from trying to reach goals that are set. He's the CEO of Euronav. He's the CMA Commodore this year.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So he's going to be all around here. He's really somebody, he's very approachable and he's extremely smart, but he's somebody that recognizes opportunity.
Okay. I will ask him if he would like to be a guest here then.
Well, you can let him know that I suggested it.
Thank you very much for taking the time.
Of course.
And good luck with the ambassadorship within the IMO. I think they need you there.
Well, I'm just, as I said, honored to be a part of the ambassador scheme because I do think it's a great initiative, and to be one of the first ambassadors is really a thrill.
Yeah.
And Lena, keep up the good work that you're doing because our industry needs it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As you could hear, Carleen gave me quite a pep talk to continue my journey as an independent consultant in the shipping industry. So I promise you there will be more episodes of this shipping podcast. It's picking up speed now, and I think Germany is a country where more and more people realize that this is the shipping podcast to listen to. As I mentioned in the last episode, I have put together a newsletter where I share a little bit about the behind the scenes, what happens when I am interviewing people, and who do I meet where, and what does it look like, and what do they say, and how much fun do we have. If you haven't already put your name on the list for the newsletter, you can go to the website shippingpodcast.com and scroll down to the very bottom of that page. And that is where you put your email address, so you won't miss any of the coming newsletters. I get questioned almost every day now if I'm going to SMM in Hamburg. No, I'm not. I'm going to try out the Danish Maritime Days in Copenhagen late October instead. I have also realized that going to conferences doesn't really mean that I get some interviews done. I have realized that people do not want to go to conferences and enter into a quiet room with me and sit down and do a podcast interview. They would much rather mingle and meet new people and build on their network. So that is why it's not really a good idea to go to the conferences to make new episodes. Then again, I can always meet with the sponsors, so it doesn't hurt to go to a conference, unless it's a boring one. I've been to a few. I can tell you all about it. So, I'm going to go back to my newsletter. You're going to wait for 2 weeks to get the next interview, another interesting guest that attended the CMA in Stamford, Connecticut in March this year. Until then, keep safe and see you out there. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast where the maritime professionals are talking about their everyday job.